This is not America's Next Top Best Friend.
I've had enough of you beast. Beast? Yeah.
You need to watch yourself before you get checked.
Who gonna check me, boo?
Should've never called me a fat ass Kelly Price.
Everything about you is perfect. Did you stone those tights? Oh, you're smiling.
And would you stop taking pictures of yourself? Your sister's going to jail.
Empty chair, do a solo.
Buy pumpkin.
How do you know what's good for me? That's my opinion!
This is the Recap Episode, a weekly podcast about exploring and analyzing the stories told by reality TV season by season. I'm your host, Walker, social scientist and reality TV superfan. For this episode, I'm covering Rocco's Dinner Party, a 2011 cooking competition show that aired on Bravo, hosted by the eponymous Rocco DiSpirito. If you like what you hear in this episode, then consider giving the show a follow on your preferred podcasting platform, rate and review the show, and follow the pod on social media at Instagram at The Recap Episode. The dinner party has a long history as an important cultural custom. People, of course, have gathered at mealtimes throughout history to share in this communal practice, celebrate events, perform rituals and religious ceremonies, and even to discuss political matters. Over time, they eventually became a signifier of status and networking, where it became important for hosts to deliver parties of sufficient quality for their social class and for guests to attend with the appropriate behaviors, lest they never be invited back. The dinner party is also a reality TV staple, in the Bravo world especially. So many iconic Real Housewives moments occur around the dinner table. Here's the general idea for this show, which is kind of a bizarre one. Rocco DiSpirito, a celebrity chef, challenges chefs to produce a dinner party for himself and his friends, some of whom are celebrities of various levels of fame. 3 chefs start each episode. Rocco then pairs them down to 2 in the first round of challenge, and those 2 then have to design, plan, and execute a dinner party fitting a certain theme. Rocco then selects a winner based on the overall experience, but primarily the food, as he is a chef, and the winner receives $20,000. If you've watched Beat Bobby Flay, this 2-stage format will probably feel familiar to you. That's kind of an interesting concept for sure, also a bit of a strange one. I definitely, if you asked me to come up with a food-themed competition show, I don't know that I would come up with dinner parties immediately as an idea, although it is for sure a very creative one, especially tasking the chefs to not only do all the food, like figure out the menu and make the food, but also to figure out what theme do they want, how do they want the decor to go, what do they want the guests to do during the dinner party, how to do the pacing and everything. In many food competition shows, chefs who work as either private chefs or caterers are often seen as like underdogs to chefs who work in restaurants or even own their own restaurants, or those who do a lot of like cookbooks and whatnot. The catering chefs and cooks are usually eliminated early in many of these cooking shows. If they make it through, it's usually an underdog moment and a surprise. And in part, it's just because they're used to working in a different kind of environment and pacing and setting. However, this show is then an opportunity for that kind of chef to shine. And will they? Let's find out. But first, who exactly is Rocco DiSpirito? I just want to put in here real quick. I love cooking competitions. I love all the shows on the Food Network. I like Top Chef on Bravo. I love MasterChef, all these different things. Both the competition shows and the shows that are kind of like more explored. I love all that content. Love food. I had no idea who Rocco DiSpirito was. And after I did all my research for this show, I learned that had I been like 10 years earlier, I would have known who Rocco DiSpirito was. He kind of like fell off and disappeared in a strange way. And this is one of the last kind of like TV things he did that was like directly only attached to him, before mostly just being cameo roles from then on out. So, Rocco DiSpirito, in this show, he's our main host and judge. And I don't want to spend too much time providing a biography of Rocco. This is a reality TV podcast after all. but I do want to give a somewhat brief overview of his background because it's important for how I watched this show and how I analyzed it and what I later learned about him and kind of what I'm going to talk about. So, in an interview for In the Weeds podcast with Chef Spike Mendelsohn, Rocco talks about how he never really sought to get into the TV world initially. He was a cook. He had no interest in like marketing and such, but then people really started pushing him towards it. In part, I think, because he's a very handsome guy. He's got a face for TV, for sure. Rocco is generally known for being a celebrity chef and a cookbook author. He opened the restaurant Union Pacific in 1997 in Manhattan, which was an incredibly successful venture for him. He did end up departing Union Pacific in 2004 to pursue an entirely different adventure, another restaurant, and a reality TV show. From 2003 to 2004, Rocco DiSpirito starred in the NBC reality TV show The Restaurant, which followed the launch and operation of a new Manhattan restaurant called Rocco's on 22nd. This show eventually ended up canceled, and in addition, the man behind the money for the restaurant, Jeffy Chodorow, successfully sued Rocco to have the restaurant shut down and have him banned from entering the premises. Rocco DiSpirito then would go on to succeed Arthur Schwartz as host of Food Talk, a morning talk show on New York radio WR in 2004 and 2005, and then he went on to host 12 episodes of the TV show Rocco Gets Real on A&E in 2008. He then kind of had a series of random appearances. This is where like the cameo roles start coming in. He was featured in a Lincoln MKX commercial. He had a cameo role in the ABC sitcom The Knights of Prosperity. He served as a guest judge on Bravo's Top Chef, where he would then later return to the franchise as a guest sous chef in Season 3 and guest judge again in Season 4. He appeared on NBC's The Biggest Loser twice as part of specific challenges around diet food and healthy food cooking. He was a contestant on Season 7 of Dancing with the Stars. He placed 9th overall while paired with professional ballroom dancer Katarina Smirnoff. In 2010, Rocco appeared as himself in the ABC television series Castle. And then finally, we get to 2011, where we get the show at the focus of this episode of the podcast, Rocco's Dinner Party. Now, I'll reiterate, I had no idea who Rocco DiSpirito was before this show. I actually discovered this show because one of the guests to his dinner party in one of the episodes is Mary Alice Stevenson, who is the main host and judge of VH1's America's Most Smartest Model, which I covered on the pod in recent episodes. While researching Mary Alice for that episode of the podcast, I learned she appeared in this show, and then I said, what in the world is this? I need to watch this and talk about it. Because I love niche shows, and I'm not claiming I know everything about the reality TV world, but if there's a show that I haven't even heard about, or don't know much about, then wide audiences likely don't know about it. And I love exposing people to reality shows they've never heard of, especially ones as bizarre as this one. What I have learned through reading articles and listening to many a podcast interview with Rocco is that he seems to be a very respected chef. He is the recipient of the James Beard Foundation Award, a distinction for chefs and restaurateurs, and every time I read about his quality as a chef and a person, he was generally always spoken in high regard. He's been attributed to being someone who really changed the game for chefs and was one of the first true celebrity chefs. It seems like he has a substantial legacy, but then I ask, why didn't I know about him until this show? Again, I love the Food Network. I love all the cooking and food shows. Yeah, I didn't know anything about him. Could be because he dropped off after the reality shows. In more recent history, he was on Guy's Grocery Games and some of other Guy Fieri's other shows and ventures. But I will say, with the amount of chefs that appear on shows like that, someone you only see once doesn't exactly stick out or is easy to remember much later. I think for me, this is mostly just a case of everything that he did was really like before my time and was before I was like paying attention to that kind of media. And it doesn't really like, they're not like replaying Rocco Gets Real or The Restaurant or Rocco's Dinner Party on any of these channels. You have to seek these things out or have someone show them to you. So, I'm approaching this show and kind of analyzing it from the perspective of what does this show tell me about Rocco DiSpirito? What does it introduced me to, what impression do I get of him from explicitly only watching the show? I often ask on the podcast, what do these shows do for the people who make them and the people who star in them in the cast? And in this case, this show will be doing a lot of heavy lifting to explaining who Rocco is for me, and potentially the same for many other people who might go watch this show. So I want to provide some background on the show. When I talk about the interesting information about a show, I like to try and provide some information about where the show came from, who came up with the idea, who produced it, how the people involved were gathered together and cast, and any other behind-the-scenes info that may be useful for recapping and analyzing the show. Rocco's Dinner Party was created by the team of Cleve Keller and Dave Knoll, who have worked together since 2007 as Keller/Knoll. As a duo, they have created and or produced many popular series. Food Network's Chopped, Chopped Jr., and Chopped Champions, as well as many different types of shows for the Game Show Network, AMC, BBC America, HGTV, Lifetime, Oxygen, TLC, Travel, Discover, WeTV, and even Yahoo. Keller and Knoll were kind of just making whatever they wanted for a while, but since 2010 have focused exclusively on creating and producing game shows, competition formats, and reality formats. Thus, we end up with Rocco's Dinner Party. Aside from that info about the production team, I honestly couldn't find much about the specific creation of this show, who came up with the idea, who started this whole adventure and everything. However, I was able to find quite a bit about the history of dinner parties, and I feel like giving a brief history lesson. In the Western world, feasts and banquets were common throughout the ancient, classical, and medieval periods. The Greek symposium, and later the Roman convivium, were important to social life and were often intellectual affairs where guests reclined, enjoyed wine, and engaged in philosophical debate. Wealthy Romans would host lavish banquets, and food held high importance. During the medieval and Middle Ages, feasts became an essential part of noble and royal social life. Grand banquets emerged as a way to display wealth and power, and served both social and political purposes. Intimacy took a back seat to grand gestures of hospitality, with foods such as roasted meats, pies, and rich pastries filling tables, showing off all the resources of the state and the effort that can be commanded to produce such a spread. Now, the modern concept of the dinner party began to evolve starting in the 17th and 18th centuries. This began the push towards dining events in the homes of the middle class and the elite, which heightened expectations of dress. Many of the customs for this formal, intimate dining came down from royalty and aristocracy. By the Victorian era, in the 19th century, the dinner party became an established cultural custom in both Europe and in the United States. The Victorians now are well known for their strict codes of etiquette, and this transformed dinner parties into very elaborate rituals. There were expectations for behavior, physicality, polite topics of conversation, dress, and gender played specific roles as well. The host or hostess was one of the most important parts of the dinner party in this time period. They were expected to make the party successful. In the 20th century, dinner parties went through drastic changes over the entire run of the century. In the post-World War I era, during the Roaring Twenties and the Jazz Age, parties took on new forms. On one hand, some older traditions remained, but new informalities entered this tradition, as guests would enjoy newer music, dance, and mingle among each other much more than before. Some pretty good examples of this in media, I will say, are both Downton Abbey and the kind of dinner settings they have there for the smaller groups, but you can see the transformation as the show goes on, as well as the kind of introduction of the change in attitudes for women and their role. But also you could look at something like Great Gatsby for a larger scale one, which also then leads into the post-World War II flavor of dinner party. Hollywood really started to have an influence here, and in new forms of media, such as films, dinner parties were shown to be a thing of class and something to aspire to. Celebrities and politicians began to host exclusive dinner parties that would be broadcast to the public, almost harkening back to the noble displays of the medieval times. The lower and less elite class began their own interpretation of these parties, from where we get potlucks, which actually go all the way back to the Great Depression, as well as cocktail parties. We even get satire of the dinner party. One example that I can think of is the dinner party scene in Beetlejuice, where Beetlejuice, the demon guy, takes over this dinner party that is intended to sell up the haunted home as an attraction. In the modern and contemporary age, dinner parties face influences from social media, inclusivity of dietary needs, and a reclamation of intimacy. Especially when you think about post-COVID and everyone had to stay away from each other, dinner parties kind of had like a social media resurgence once everyone was able to come together again safely. People loved to host for the purpose of bringing people together, family and friends, and guests loved to share with their circles that they attended a fun event. In a time where the importance of communal meals, I would say, has largely been lost, holding a specific dedicated time and setting for gathering around food is now innovative and special again. So with all that history kind of placed, enter this show, which sought to take the dinner party and place it at the center of a reality TV competition. Again, reality TV is not foreign to this concept, and dinner scenes, especially on the Bravo network. And this show, however, again, made some strange, bizarre decisions that I'm very excited to tell y'all about. So, Rocco's Dinner Party aired 10 episodes on Bravo between June 15th and August 17th, 2011. Before I jump into covering the details of the show and the episodes and recapping, I just want to say you can watch Rocco's Dinner Party on YouTube or on Amazon, both as paid options. I'm sure if you are enterprising enough, you might be able to find it elsewhere. I just watched it on Amazon. I think I paid $13 for it, which is kind of the running rate on Amazon for a whole season of a show, especially one that's not really running anymore or didn't really do that well. When I watched Secrets and Wives and Princesses Long Island for recent episodes, those were also like $13. That's not too bad. This is an episodic competition show, which means we get a new batch of competitors and party guests for each episode. Each episode also had a theme or specific requirement that the chefs had to adhere to. It also means, like many other competition shows, that every episode had the same format, which makes it real easy to talk about. So, each episode began with an introduction of our 3 starting chefs. They meet Rocco, and then they participate in the Signature Dish Challenge, where they are given 30 minutes to produce their signature dish with ingredients and tools they've brought with them. They do also have access to, like, a TV cooking competition set kitchen. The set is claimed to be, quote, Rocco's Loft, which is just a reality TV set. And very interestingly, they keep showing us the facade of 172 Duane Street. I had to do a lot of Google Maps searching to figure that one out, which is just kind of like a residential / part commercial building. Like, definitely not Rocco's Loft, I'm pretty sure. But it's interesting they kept just like showing us that facade. Doubly interesting because I found out that at the time of filming the show, which was probably late 2010 or spring, like winter, springtime, early 2011, that location would have actually been under an extended lease owned by someone else. So really interesting that they kept showing us, like, this is Rocco's Loft on the outside, when it was, like, not. As far as I can tell. Anyway, they do the Signature Dish Challenge, where they produce their signature dish for Rocco. He then tastes it and judges it, and in his explanation, this signature dish should be able to tell Rocco everything about the chef. Their cooking style, their preferred tastes, their personality, everything he needs to know to be able to judge if they'll be able to deliver a quality dinner party for him and his guests. After he decides who wins this round and who will be eliminated, we're down to 2 chefs. The chef who won the Signature Dish Challenge gets the advantage of being able to choose where they want to hold their dinner party in one of 3 different types of dining rooms that are in the loft. And they also get to choose whether or not they do their party first or second. After this, the chefs meet briefly with celebrity party planner Jess Gordon to talk about their ideas for the party they want to deliver, mostly in terms of decor, experience for the guests, everything not relating to the food element. Jess is there to help them out with that. They kind of give Jess ideas, and she says, okay, I think I understand. I'll meet back up with you later after I've worked some magic. And she does work her magic. She's pretty good at this, especially when she has, like, disparate ideas from the chef and is trying to stitch them together into something coherent. We get to go with the chefs as they go grocery shopping at the Garden of Eden Gourmet Grocery Store, which is no longer open, but I believe used to be on West 14th Street near Union Square. I wanted to go since I live here in New York, and I found out it was closed. Oh, well, it closed in 2025, I believe, due to rising rent costs. But we get to see them go grocery shopping, and they talk us through some of their ideas for their different courses for the dinner party. Then we get to watch the chefs do some kind of cooking, some prep. We also get to see them meet with Jess again to see what she came up with and how she decorated the specific dining room that the chef chose to use. Then we get the 2 dinner parties. We do get an introduction to all of Rocco's guests. The first time they're shown their name and kind of what they do, or like their claim to fame in a chyron on screen. It doesn't get shown all the time, but if they haven't spoken in a while or haven't been the center of the camera for a while, their name and whatnot will get flashed back up again. And they do the 2 dinner parties back to back. So Rocco's guests are in for a 1-hour dinner party from the first chef, followed up by a 1-hour dinner party with the second chef. They may not be exactly back to back, with reality TV production. They may take the guests and whatnot and spruce them up or give them a break or something. But it probably won't be too long, because it looks like the chefs have to use like the same time frame to prepare and then deliver their party. After the parties, Rocco delivers his judgment, and he chooses who's the winner for the episode and who gets 20 grand, and then the episode wraps up with typical reality competition stuff. The winner has some words, the runner-up has some words, and walks away, and there's a celebration for whichever chef wins the episode, where they get to meet the rest of the guests who were at the dinner party. Sometimes they get to meet, or usually they get to meet 1 or 2 of the guests, in part because either there's something special about that guest that Rocco wants to incorporate into the challenge for the chefs, or, and I'll discuss this later, there's dietary restrictions that they have to talk about. So let's talk about this signature dish round. This is Rocco's time to really flex his knowledge and his experience and expertise as a chef. We get to watch the 3 chefs who start the episode run around this set kitchen, try to produce their signature dish in the 30 minutes, and we get to watch Rocco kind of observe it as well and offer his input. During that 30-minute time, Rocco usually makes 1 trip around the loft kitchen to observe not only what the chefs are making and comment on any particular ingredient of the overall dish, but also to observe how they work in the kitchen. In multiple episodes, he ends up making comments about how organized or chaotic the chefs are, and how these tendencies give him confidence or apprehension towards their ability to deliver a quality dinner party. And it seems he does take that into account for his judging. He's not just judging on the quality of the dish presented to him, taste and food-wise. Just an interesting but understandable angle to take. Regarding the food element and the actual culinary experience of the dishes presented to him, he tends to judge on presentation, flavor, creativity, and the overall concept of the dish. He also often asks the chefs for their own opinion on what they've made. Again, he claims in the show that the chef's performance in this round should tell him everything he needs to know about that chef and their ability to pull off the party in the second half of the challenge and the episode. Kind of like he's some kind of kitchen-based oracle or clairvoyant that does plate palmistry. To the viewer that maybe doesn't know who Rocco is, like myself, this round serves to establish his credibility and his expertise through the way he judges and what he picks up on. I'm going to throw some sociology at you because I'm a nerd like that and I've studied this before, but for Rocco, this builds up what sociologist Pierre Bourdieu would call cultural capital, in a culinary flavor of sorts, pun completely intended. You may have heard of money, assets, and things of monetary value referred to as capital before. Bourdieu theorized a separation of this financial capital from instead these more cultural elements that can also have power and place people within castes in society: speech, fashion, art, intellect, music, etc. Those who have more cultural capital than others, think like celebrities, musicians, artists, authors, speakers, chefs even, are the ones who get to make the rules, so to speak, about what is and isn't high culture or what could be considered tasteful. It is a little cyclical in nature, kind of like a chicken and the egg kind of situation. I like to think of an example as the Met Gala. The people who are invited are chosen because they exhibit high cultural status and value, but the metric for that is also set by their high culture peers in various realms. And all of this is also supported by people in sort of lower culture. Those of us, the poors of whatever kind, are the ones who look up to these people and kind of intrinsically support these ideas of separation and a hierarchy of cultural value. So Rocco then plants himself as a judge of high cultural capital in the culinary world. And I also learned that through my research about him for this episode, that he kind of has earned that spot. From what I can tell from a lot of other chefs, they consider him to be a really good chef and kind of the original celebrity chef. So he has earned his place there among his peers. The show also serves to promote his cultural standing by giving him the space to speak authoritatively about this practice and the products of cooking. When he says a dish looks bad but has incredible flavor or is cooked excellently, we as viewers latch on to that and are impressed by his ability to discern the intricacies of flavor and separate the visual and taste senses. By extension, this then also grants the chefs that are competing their own morsels of cultural capital. We watch the expert chef, the judge of cultural taste, decide who does well and who does not in this shared endeavor. And then we also believe those selected chefs have a greater standing in that domain than we do, or the ones they're competing against. This is a common, cultural effect in reality competition shows. The way that judges or main hosts, especially if it's one person playing both roles, are kind of given authority and reverence in that role, serves to plant them as an authority figure, an expert, someone of high status within the cultural realm of that show. A really good example is RuPaul. RuPaul, of course, has put the work in to become drag queen supermodel of the world. But when you're in the show, everyone very respectful and reveres RuPaul. And when you step outside of that, you face consequences for going against the flow in the cultural hierarchy. Same thing happens with cooking shows as well. I mean, think Gordon Ramsay on MasterChef. And I also just want to throw in here, all cooking shows serve to make statements on taste and what kind of food can be considered high culture or special. I know that when I watch a show, whenever an ingredient I've never seen before shows up, I'm always curious about what it is, but one of my first thoughts about these unknown ingredients to me is that maybe they're difficult to source, or they're a specialty of some kind of geographical location or culture, which would grant them high value on the basis of being rare to my current lived existence. And this isn't always exactly true. Sometimes these ingredients are just things I haven't heard of, like gooseberries, which I'm pretty sure I could find at a store near me. But this could also extend to fish that I've never heard of that may be revered. Caviar is expensive, so it has a high financial capital cost. But because of that, we associate it with high aristocracy, which is then also associated with fine dining, which would be a high cultural thing. With all that said, the signature dish round also appears to be Rocco's time to psychologically play with the contestants for the episode. He loves to give them the runaround as to whether he will compliment or tear down an aspect of what is presented to him. And he also loves to make the chefs question themselves. When I first started watching, I thought he was kind of going for Gordon Ramsay, Jamie Oliver kind of twist on it. And then I realized it's this is just Rocco. That's just how he does the judging. In most episodes, he'll ask one of the three chefs if they would serve what they made for Rocco for the signature dish round to their normal clientele. He'll ask if they would eat it the way the dish was cooked or presented. He'll push them on their choices that he himself might not have made, call out some of their more ridiculous decisions, and even ask simply if what they served him is what they intended to serve him. Just kind of throwing it back in their face. I kind of liked it. It was a little ridiculous, but it was also kind of fun. He also likes to ask the other chefs in the signature dish round, because there's 3, to try each other's dishes and get their input. At first, I thought this was him trying to get backup for his judgments, but then after watching the whole series, I think it was more just him kind of tormenting the competing chefs. I'll highlight some fun examples of this. In the first episode, caterer Britt Current presents a dish that she describes as creative and interesting. Rocco challenges her on the use of the word interesting to describe her cooking, and asks one of the other contestants what he thinks of that word. First episode, great start. Again, at this point, I kind of thought he was just doing a bit and just trying to be mean for the sake of being mean. Now I know better. In a later episode, executive chef Ryan Poley presents Rocco with a, quote, deconstructed fish taco, which is actually just a piece of fish with some veg on a plate that is infused with the essence of tortilla. The chef says that this shows that he doesn't take himself too seriously, to which Rocco asks, very facetiously, "You think a deconstructed fish taco shows that you don't take yourself too seriously?" And Chef Ryan is stunned. That was such an incredible line that I had to like quote it down directly when I was taking notes while watching the show. Rocco doesn't seem to like to put people in their place. There's a very kind of arrogant, cocky chef in one of the later episodes, and Rocco really like goes out of his way to try to humble this man in front of him. You can tell he wants some humility. He wants to be respected, not as like in a king sitting on the throne kind of sense, but kind of like I am a chef, I've been doing this, and you're like my competitor. You're the one competing for my favor. Some other great lines from Rocco included, my gut instinct says that you would create for impression rather than making a magical moment in time, when talking to a chef about whether or not she would be able to produce a quality dinner party. And one of the best examples of the runaround, he goes, would you be surprised if I said it tasted the best? And the chef is like, oh my gosh, thank you. And he goes, I didn't say it did, but would you be surprised? Well, so am I. It's kind of silly, but I'm kind of here for it. There was one time that the signature dish round did not go as expected, and that was in the final episode, coincidentally. After the chefs presented their dishes, Rocco couldn't make a decision on who should remain for the dinner party round. So, he gave all 3 chefs 5 minutes and the exact same set of ingredients to make the best steak possible. One of them delivered a well-cooked and seasoned steak, but presented bizarrely, all like chopped up and in the shape of a flower. One gave a standard-looking steak that lacked super strong flavor and was like swimming in wine. And the third served a steak that was still raw on the inside. That chef was immediately sent through the trap door and into Rocco's dungeon, never to be seen again. So in all, the signature dish round was a way to introduce chefs and then swiftly get rid of one of them, for Rocco to exert his power and his cultural standing, and also for some easy, simple banter or drama as the chefs complain about each other in confessional interviews. I don't really touch on that, but if you've watched reality TV competitions, you can kind of expect what happened there. After the signature dish round, Rocco explains the details of the general theming for the dinner parties for that episode to the 2 remaining chefs. He also usually explains the advantage that the winner of the signature dish round receives, getting to choose when they go, and getting first choice of the selection for the room they present in. He'll then also introduce Jess Gordon, who will help them out with the decor and the theming and the planning and everything. So the themes, we had 10 episodes. Episode 1, our title of the episode and also the theme, was Speakeasy. Think, hidden bar, hidden pub, prohibition era. That's what the vibe was going for. One of the chefs went like gangster vibes with it, and the other one went like VIP lounge for their like theme, for example. Episode 2 was called The Mystery Guest, and there was a mystery guest. The chefs were given some hints about one of the guests' background and career to use for theming without at first being told who it is. For example, they were told this guest loves food with lots of spices, and one of their favorite places to vacation and to visit is Bali. The guest was Padma Lakshmi, in case you're curious. Episode 3, the theme was all about traditional Italian food, which connects back to Rocco's Italian-American heritage. Episode 4, the theme was like summer party, and this one got weird, and I'll loop back to this one later, but this is the only episode that had like a specific requirement for the number of courses and what each course should be. Rocco explicitly told them he wanted an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert, and a summer-themed cocktail. He also required that all of the courses be under 350 calories and 10 grams of fat. This was like the healthy eating episode. The theme in episode 5 was town and country. One chef had to be inspired by the rural countryside and like locally sourced ingredients, and the other one was inspired by like the modern town. This was given out randomly to the 2 chefs, which I kind of thought was interesting. So there actually was no but it was presented as an advantage to the winner of the signature dish. It was like, oh, you get to pick which of these 2 random things you'll draw from. So it wasn't actually an advantage. Episode 6, the theme was French cuisine. The chefs were specifically tasked to deliver a twist on a classic Julia Child dish from the art of French cooking. And Julie Powell was one of the guests for that episode. I kind of freaked out a little bit. Julie and Julia is one of my favorite movies. Episode 7's theme was gastropubs and like pub food, very British. Episode 8 was fashion-inspired. Each course had to have 2 dishes that used the same ingredient in different ways. One of the dishes had to be couture and kind of evolved in a new way at looking at the ingredient, and one had to be ready to wear, something we're very familiar with. An example given in the show was like a cheeseburger versus steak tartare. Episode 9 was perfect pairings. This was to actually celebrate a wedding anniversary of 2 of the guests, and all the guests were couples that episode. Each course had to be 2 parts that can both stand alone, but then are greater together. And then episode 10 was Liza Minnelli's 65th birthday party. That's right, Liza Minnelli was a guest on this reality TV show. Okay, so let's talk about some of this weird stuff this show did. First, the pacing. We need time to mostly focus on the planning, prep, and execution of the dinner parties, so the signature dish round is all wrapped up within the first 15 minutes of the episode at the latest. It really feels like we meet the chefs, Rocco arrives, they cook their dish, Rocco eats and judges, and someone is gone before we even get settled into the episode. I'll also mention here, before all that, each episode has a preview of brief clips of the episode before we get the intro sequence where Rocco tells us who he is and what the whole point of the show is. In the intro sequence, they have to very selectively pick clips to show because, again, one of the chefs of the 3 who enter is gone after a quarter of the episode. Not even a third of the episode. So these preview clips, it's all stuff that happens in the first 10 minutes and maybe a little bit of what happens later on, which is just a strange choice. They could have just not done that. They could have just stepped right into the show and not had this at all. They also do the same. I noticed each episode has a preview at the end for the following episode, which these would have aired a week apart when the show aired. That can be helpful for getting viewers interested in the next episode, or if the network was doing the kind of thing where they replay the previous week's episode before the current week's new episode. But they had to use the same exact cut. So when I'm watching this as a marathon, I finish an episode. If I don't click to the next one, I then get a preview of the next episode at the end of the episode I finished. Then I go to the next episode, watch that same content again for the intro to the episode, because it's just the same exact thing, then get that episode. From the editing side, that was just a little strange. Next, talk about the chefs a little bit. We had a really good, healthy mix of different types of chefs. There are a lot who work in or operate or run their own restaurants. There are a few who were executive chefs, or maybe they're the head chef or cook at a restaurant. And then there's a good, healthy amount of caterers in the mix, which we like to see. There was one food truck operator. There were a couple of people who were on there who were just not currently working as chefs or cooks. There was one woman in the last episode who is a opera singer, and she used to be a cook, but now she does opera, and she keeps cooking on the side, which is cool. There was one person who owns a biscotti company, and her text on screen just says sometimes caters or occasional caterer. There was one that's just a hobbyist cook who did not make it past the signature dish round because she collapsed under the pressure. Which is kind of sad. It'd be nice to see what she was going to do. And I commend her confidence for signing up for the show. The other interesting thing about the chefs they selected was a majority of them were from around the tri-state area, meaning Jersey, New York, Connecticut. The show was filmed in Manhattan, so I'm wondering if this was a cost thing, perhaps. We had a few chefs who were from out of state. I can think of off the top of my head without going back and looking at all of them. One from Chicago and one from LA, but most of them were from nearby, either already living and working in New York City, from around Connecticut, maybe as far as Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and then Jersey. There's a good amount of people from Jersey. Again, hard to tell if it was a cost thing, if it was just ease of getting people in, or if those are the only people who really applied. Maybe there wasn't a lot of payment put forward to the people participating in the show if they were coming from really far away. So maybe they only got people who could afford to drive over themselves to the city for the week or however long it took to film. It at least took 2 days to film. They did the signature dish and the planning and shopping on one day, and then they did all the dinner party stuff on a second day. One of the weirder episodes, aside from Liza Minnelli's birthday party, was episode 4. I'd seen 3 episodes at this point because I watched them in order. And I thought I'd gotten used to the formula, and I knew what to expect. Suddenly, when episode 4 arrives, we get hit with product placement and like in-episode covert advertisement. Rocco writes cookbooks, and he's written a lot about kind of like healthy cooking, dieting, cooking meals for a specific structured, diet program and whatnot. And after the signature dish challenge in episode 4, suddenly Rocco, when he presents the theme for the parties, and this is the one that had the summer party theme, but all the dishes had to be under 350 calories and under 10 grams of fat, Rocco gives one of his cookbooks that had recently come out, the one that came out in 2010, to each of the chefs, and he's like, oh, well, here's some ideas. You can get some inspiration for your dinner party from my book. And then there was a lot of like panning to a stack of the books, and the camera would linger on it, and it would show the chefs holding the book, and it would show the chefs later like looking through the recipes and being like, oh, I'm gonna make this seems like a good thing to make, or adapting their own recipes according to what info they could get from the book, which is fine. And I was like, okay, that was a little strange. Then later, after the 2 dinner parties went and executed, but before the judging, we got this like quick 30 to 45 second scene of Rocco showing the 2 chefs who competed in the dinner party stage how to cook one of his recipes, or like how to cook chicken and make it taste like fried chicken or something in a more healthy way, how to like reduce the amount of oil used or something like that. While they're holding the books, and it was very much, Rocco showing them and then looking at the camera and being like, oh, and you can learn more about this in my book. And then we panned over to the stack of books again and lingered on there. So you got to see a good view of the cover and you knew what book to buy. They didn't do this for any other episode. It was only in episode 4. And I understand why when you think about the challenge, because the challenge, again, was the under 350 calories, under 10 grams of fat. But why not do it for the other ones? Why not find a way to like make this a crux of the whole show? Maybe it doesn't have to be the whole party and each course, but maybe it's like, oh, for this challenge, I want you to design a dessert that doesn't use processed ingredients or something, It was just weird to have it for one episode in the middle, and then it never happened again. Now, arguably one of the most important aspects of this show that would draw someone into it is the guests. Each episode had at minimum 6 people joining Rocco. The final one had 8, with a total of 62 guests across all the episodes. Out of all of these guests, here's the ones that I knew who they were before watching the show and before having to like look them up and be like, what's this person known for? And it's not that many, but I will go through the list. Mary Alice Stevenson, who I mentioned previously, was the host of America's Most Smartest Model, but she also does like fashion and philanthropy stuff. Padma Lakshmi, Caroline Manzo from Real Housewives of New Jersey, Joey Fatone, Betty Wong, actress, Tyler Peck, Melissa Joan Hart, Julie Powell, Kat Deely, Raven Simone, Nikki Blonsky, Kara Jenks, Samantha Bee, and Jason Jones, Jonathan Adler, Sandra Bernard, Alan Cumming, Sam Harris, and then Liza Minnelli. That's, 17 out of 60. Honestly, some I only knew of just because of like media that I'd watched and consumed. Mary Alice because of the reality show. Tyler Peck I knew of because she was in a documentary I was obsessed with back in 2018, 2019. But like a lot of the other guests, everyone else was just kind of like, who is this? Each episode had, or most of the episodes tended to have a comedian as part of the group, which I do believe was strategically put in there so that there was at least one person who was comfortable with riffing on camera to make the dinner party shots interesting and to always make sure there was like an engaging conversation and not just like Rocco talking to one of his chef friends about the chef business. Because like Marcus Samuelsson was there in the first episode, who's a big chef guy that I've now learned, but I didn't know that ahead of time. There is like an important meta reason I'm going to talk about why it's valuable that these guests were here. But first I do want to introduce the chaos that the guests introduced into this show. On one hand, these guests tended to introduce twists that at the very least felt very last minute. Usually dietary restrictions. Maybe the production team knew about the dietary restrictions ahead of time and simply didn't tell the chefs, but it certainly didn't seem like either of the two chefs who were assembling the dinner parties and cooking all this food knew to consider these when planning. Every time it was brought up, it was always like a freak out moment. And the chefs only got 3 hours to like do all the food prep for the party, and they were often still like, finishing up the cooking as the party was being executed and happening in real time. I think some of this also could potentially just be a sign of the times. I think in the present day, chefs would be more likely to automatically consider creating like a vegetarian option of a dish for the party, or to include both like a land meat option and a seafood option, for example. But in 2011, I could see those considerations not being as present, especially in the kind of like high stress environment of a reality TV show. There is one or two chefs who do mention when this happens, or it's like, oh, when I'm in the restaurant and I'm cooking on the line, it's not that difficult to accommodate, like allergies. It happens all the time. We're used to it. But it does seem like it was always a surprise for these guys. And it was always introduced very last minute. The chefs got 3 hours. It looked like maybe the guests arrived within the last hour or so of that prep time. And then they would like tell Rocco like, oh, actually, I'm allergic to shellfish. I don't eat red meat. I'm a vegetarian. And so Rocco would take them back, introduce them to the chefs, which is kind of a nice moment, and then explain like, oh, hey, yeah, can you accommodate me? And then it became like part of the challenge and the expectation for the chefs. There was only like one episode where a chef legitimately completely forgot, and it was kind of cathartic to watch because he was one of the asshole chefs, so he got put in his place for that episode. And most of the time, the chefs either made those people a specific different version of the dish they were already planning to make, substituting out the problematic ingredients. A couple of times, the chefs had enough strategic planning time and enough like ingredients they got from the store to just change that course completely. That way, all the guests at the party had the same dining experience, which I think Rocco usually took in favor for his judging. In a few cases, the guests were also used to add additional twists to the challenge the chefs were given. Again, to put on a good dinner party. Not just to like cook well, but you have to give a good experience. When Padma Lakshmi was there, she gifted like a Caribbean spice blend to the chefs. And upon seeing this, Rocco was like, oh, that's wonderful. How about you guys use that and like whip up a little appetizer for me and my guest using that? And the chefs were like, okay. I think both of them just took like some kind of fish and put the seasoning on it and cooked it real fast and like sent it out to the guests. But it was just like another thing they had to do. In one of the episodes, comedian Jeffrey Ross basically asked for an entirely new menu just for him in the healthy eating episode, including asking for a dish that neither of the chefs knew what it was. Matzo something, where it's like chopped up, crumbled up matzo, like cooked in egg. Neither of them knew about that or like how to do it. And then in the Perfect Pairings episode, which was used to actually celebrate the 10th anniversary of Samantha Bee and Jason Jones, they had Samantha and Jason come back into the kitchen and kind of talk to them about like, oh, what's a special moment from your marriage? And they told a story about like going to Cuba. So then Rocco was like, oh, can you like throw something Cuban inspired into the menu because of that? And one of the chefs was like, I've never been to Cuba. I don't cook Cuban food. What the hell am I going to do? As much as it made for like interesting twists, it kind of just made for frustrating TV to watch because it really felt like unfair to the chefs to have to accommodate this and then it be brought into the judging as well. Now, why is it important to talk about the guests, and why is it important that who was selected to come comes? Well, again, when we think about what this show serves to do for Rocco DiSpirito, having all of these connections and showing them off is not only another aspect of just holding dinner parties, as I discussed in the history of dinner parties, but it also serves to continue to build his cultural capital. During the dinner parties part of the episodes, we would cut back and forth between the party and the kitchen. In the kitchen, we observe the chefs cooking, keeping up with the pace of the party and their food output, and dealing with the hired wait staff that is there to help them, and then addressing any other back-of-house challenges. In the party room, we observe Rocco entertaining his guests, engaging them in conversation and banter, and getting their feedback on the party decor, theming, and the food they are eating. We also get some opportunities for some of the guests to talk about their work and their backgrounds. This is important for Rocco as a central figure here because he is at the same table as these people. He's literally on their same level in this show. Rocco has the same standing as Liza Minnelli during the party celebrating her birthday. Visually, he's actually placed above them because Rocco is always sat at the head of the table with the camera directly centered on him, while most everyone else gets a 3/4 angle camera shot. I know you were not expecting me to talk about the actual, cinematography of this show, but it's important. It changes the way you view these people. But also, again, I didn't know who Rocco was. He'd kind of fallen off before I really got into all this. But the fact that he's able to pull Liza Minnelli, Alan Cumming, Padma Lakshmi, Samantha Bee and Jason Jones. In one of the episodes, 2 of the guests were NPR radio hosts. That was the fashion one. Kara Jenks, who had won Project Runway, was a guest in that episode. Another high fashion editor, I believe her name is Nicole Miller, was in that episode. He can pull all of these cultural figures from different realms as well, which really serves to show kind of his standing and his status. And I think that's important, especially when you kind of consider his history leading up to this point. The restaurant show had to end, and that restaurant ended up being closed. One of his previous restaurants, Union Pacific, he left that. And I don't really know what Rocco Gets Real is about yet, but that show I think only had 1 season. So when you kind of think about what's his standing currently, what does he want to do, you can also see how having a show like this helps to reinforce that he should be an important, a considered, and a recognized and respected cultural icon in this realm. He should continue to be the first good and quality celebrity chef. And here's why. Look at all these people I know. Look at all these connections. I mentioned earlier that people with high cultural capital are the ones who get to decide what counts and doesn't count as good taste, something that should be held in high regard, or something that should just be considered trash. Having all of these other people who also have similarly high cultural capital, but in different domains, allows them to come in, and then for the audience, allows for a wider diversity of people at the same conversation, debating on what should count as good taste. And it's really going to vary from person to person, but what the show is trying to get you to latch onto is all of these people are respected, they're high achievers in their fields, they have this high cultural standing, and so when they make a call out or they make a decision about something that is good or something that they don't like, when it comes to the theming, the decor, the experience, or the food, you are inclined to trust that decision and trust that authority. You don't have to. You could choose to not care about any of these people and what they have to say. But, for example, in the episode where Tyler Peck showed up, again, I'm a big fan of her work as a ballerina and as a dancer, and I really liked the documentaries and the kind of stuff she does in her career. Every time she was kind of like, oh, I don't really like this, I was kind of like, you know what, Tyler, you're probably so right. I wanted to agree with her because I hold her in high regard. And because of that, she then has the power to influence what I think about the experience she had and what I'm watching, which also then extends to the chef. If she says she doesn't like that dish, then it makes me think less about the chef who prepared that dish. And so now you're kind of seeing the unraveling of the power at play here, and why it's important to kind of consider when you're shown celebrities or celebrity adjacent people to understand what they can do to you and influence your understanding of things because of this culture power that is granted to them, and that people sometimes, without really realizing it, uphold and work to preserve. Are you really going to disagree with Liza Minnelli or Padma Lakshmi? Are you? So, that's all I have to say about Rocco's Dinner Party. As soon as I saw the first episode of this show, I was hooked. I was obsessed. It was so different, and I was having such a strange experience with it that I already knew I was going to enjoy watching the rest of it and talking about it so much. Again, if you can spare the $13 or find it elsewhere, I recommend watching this one. Not only is it fairly entertaining and enjoyable to watch, it's only 10 episodes as well, but it's also just such a little diamond in the rough, a little hidden gem that it's becoming part of my list of shows that I will never shut up about. And if you get me into a conversation about reality TV, I'm going to be recommending it to people for a long time. But with that said, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Recap Episode. If you liked what you heard today, please rate the podcast, follow on your preferred podcasting platform, interact with the show, leave a comment. What kind of dinner party would you want to go to, or would you put on? Would you want a party with Liza Minnelli? Would you want to go to a party hosted by Rocco DiSpirito? I kind of would now. If you'd like, you can also follow the pod on social media, on Instagram at The Recap Episode, or on YouTube at The Recap Episode Pod. Until next time, I'm off to actually go plan my own dinner party. Mine is campy themed.